After the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020, we have seen sweeping protests across the nation led by an organization called Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was founded in 2013 and whose mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on black communities by the state and vigilantes. Since the start of the protests in Minneapolis on May 25th, Minneapolis has seen over $55 million in building damage, looting, and more during those protests. I decided it would be a good idea to try to donate to help these communities that were damaged since the protests and rioting has started to sweep the nation. I then ran into a couple conflicting issues with the Black Lives Matter organization's website. Black Lives Matter, who is organizing these protests across the nation, does not condemn any of the damage or violence caused since the protests have begun. Also on their website, they do not have any listed statistics or overall facts to back the movement, along with any posted legislation that is currently affecting the black community in any racist way, or how it needs to be changed with any new implemented legislation, aside from the defunding of the police department. With that being said, I wanted to take the time to do a little bit of research and go through the statistics and overall studies in relation to racism and police brutality throughout the United States to see if the approach Black Lives Matter was taking was a good approach or a potentially misguided approach, and wanted to give people the opportunity to take all of this information and to do what they please and form their own opinion. Let me know in the comments your opinion based on the data presented. Here is what you can find out by reading through the Black Lives Matter website. I will make sure to exclude all of the things that are mostly being publicly advertised alongside of the movement during these protests. Here are a few things that aren't being talked about that are posted goals of the Black Lives Matter movement. We see ourselves as part of the global black family, and we are aware of the different ways we are impacted or privileged as black people who exist in different parts of the world. We are self-reflexive and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift black trans folk, especially black trans women who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence. We build a space that affirms black women and is free from sexism, misogyny, and environments in which men are centered. Also, we practice empathy. We engage comrades with the intent to learn about and connect with their contexts. We dismantle the patriarchal practice that requires mothers to work double shifts. Also, we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as an extended family and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. Now, the only main goal in legislation listed by the Black Lives Matter is defunding the police. Here you'll see a description of the overall message for defunding the police by Black Lives Matter. No particular details in how any of this would be implemented or the particular legislation and how it would look, but this is the information we have so far, aside from what we hear in the protests about no police entirely. Now let's start with the overall population. The overall population, as far as the Census.gov poll from 2019, are as follows. White alone are 76.5%. Black or African American are 13.4%. American Indian 1.3%, Asian 5.9%, Native Hawaiian 0.2%, etc. Now we will refer to the UCR.FBI.gov Uniform Crime Report for Crime in the United States for 2017. This is the overview of Table 43 of arrests by race and ethnicity for 2017. In 2017, 68.9% of all individuals arrested were white, 27.2% were black or African American, and 3.9% were other races. Of adults arrested for murder, 52.5% were black or African American, 44.8% were white, and 2.8% were of other races. Black or African American juveniles comprised 50.9% of all juveniles arrested for violent crimes. White juveniles accounted for 56.2% of all juveniles arrested for property crimes. If we go into the murder statistics, we go to the ucr.fbi.gov. Murder by race, sex, and ethnicity of victim by race, sex, and ethnicity of offender in 2017, we will find that white on white average was 2,861. Murder of white on black was 264. Murder of white on other races was 72. Then if we look, we will see that black on white was 576. Black on black was 2,627. And then 35 for other races. Then other races on white, 59. Other races on black or African American, 17. And then other races, 144. If we reference the Statista poll for the number of people shot to death by police in the United States from 2017 to 2020 by race, we will find that the average for 2019 for white was 370, for black was 235, for Hispanic was 158, and other 39. There have been reports about the number of unarmed black people and white people shot by police in the year of 2019. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and FBI, that keeps tabs on deaths resulting from interactions with police, both provided incomplete data that takes years to record. More reliable data came from the Washington Post and projects such as mapping police violence and fatal encounters. According to the Washington Post data through June 3rd, police in line of duty fatally shot 10 unarmed black people and 20 unarmed white people in 2019. The data is updated as new facts emerge, and by June 5th, the numbers jumped to 15 unarmed blacks and 25 unarmed whites. We have heard a lot about police brutality, specifically on race. If we look at a study from Heather McDonald called "There is No Epidemic of Race Police Shootings." This is from the National Review in July of 2019. A new study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences demolishes the Democratic narrative regarding race and police shootings, which holds that white officers are engaged in an epidemic of racially biased shootings of black men. It turns out that white officers are no more likely than black or Hispanic officers to shoot black civilians. It is a racial group's rate of violent crime that determines police shootings, not the race of the offender. The more frequent offenders encounter violent suspects from any given racial group, the greater the chance that members of that group will be shot by police officers. In fact, if there is a bias in police shootings after crime rates are taken into account, it is against white civilians, the study found. Also, you can look to Roland G. Fryer Jr., who published in July 2017 an empirical analysis of racial differences in police use of force. It is a long one, it's 56 pages. But right in the beginning, you will see, he states, "We find no racial differences in either the raw data or whether contextual factors are taken into account in relation to racial differences in police use of force," obviously. With those articles being stated, we look at a lot of articles that aren't being brought on by the media or stated by Black Lives Matter, which are ones like this one. 18 murders in 24 hours, inside the most violent day in 60 years in Chicago. This was by Tom Schuba, Sam Charles, and Matthew Hendrickson on June 8th, 2020. It said that 25 people were killed. These are statistics on a regular basis that go along with the articles and studies done by people like Roland G. Fryer and Heather McDonald. These articles and studies are also a direct correlation with single parenthood throughout the United States. The datacenter.kidscount.org released a study from 2009 to 2018 showing the percentage of single parenthood in the home divided by race. In 2018, American Indians were 53%, Asian and Pacific Islander 15%, Black or African American 65%, Hispanic or Latino, 41%, non-Hispanic white, 24%, and 2 or more races, 40%. This goes in direct correlation with the studies done by Heather McDonald, the studies done by Roland G. Fryer Jr., and all of the government statistics. We all know as Americans that racism is bad and police brutality is bad. But do you think the destabilization of the nuclear American family and defunding of the police from Black Lives Matter is in direct conflict with the data provided? Or do you think it is the solution to curing the issue of the data provided? In relation to these protests, there have also been riots in almost every city. There has been enough death in relation to these protests and riots to almost outnumber the entire number of unarmed black men shot in the year of 2019. One example is the retired police captain that was shot to death at St. Louis Pawn Shop in a slaying caught on Facebook Live. This man was David Dorn, who was killed early Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. Do you think that Black Lives Matter has an obligation, while organizing these events, that any damage or death caused in potential association with the group should be addressed publicly on a regular basis, or at all for that matter? With all of the public data and studies that are often published in regards to the context of these protests, when will Black Lives Matter post the statistics and let people form an opinion on the subject? When will any violence or damages to the cities be condemned publicly? Do you agree with the approaches of Black Lives Matter? Do you agree with the statistics well noted throughout the nation by the federal government, state officials, and other publishers? Feel free to shoot over your opinion on the matter and add in any more data either for or against the movement. This video was not made in any way to go against the Black Lives Matter movement, but to give people an opportunity to contrast facts and evidence with the movement and develop their own opinion based on what was provided. With all of the statistics, studies, and publications on this matter, along with the stated goals of the Black Lives Matter movement, do you think these go together? Or do you think these are in direct conflict with each other? Do you think that the evidence provided is accurate? Or do you think that the nation is more along the lines with Black Lives Matter? Do you think that these studies and statistics are a result of systemic racism or a result of basic cause and effect within communities based on the equality of opportunity, not the equality of outcome?